Look at how the events of last year are being marked throughout the world. First up, Lara Logan. She'll be reporting from Afghanistan and how life has changed for the people there as the war on terror continues.
Alan Fisher is in the Iraqi capital Baghdad, which is on high alert as the US continues to threaten military action.
And Carla Romano is at the US Embassy in central London. That's been sealed off because of fears of a terrorist attack today. First, let's go to America, where the country is on a heightened state of alert and the Vice President has been moved to a secret bunker amid fears of another attack. John Stapleton is at Ground Zero. John, a painful day there today for both the American and British relatives of the victims.
Absolutely right, Eamon, and the commemoration process has now begun. Pipe bands representing the police and the fire service and the various other agencies who did such terrific work here at Ground Zero a year ago are now making their way in from the 5 boroughs of Manhattan to Ground Zero, where they will actually meet up with the families of the victims and various civic dignitaries and officials for a memorial service a little bit later today. And of course, the British people were not forgotten either. While you've been asleep at St Thomas's Church here in New York, there was a memorial service for them, attended by, amongst others, some 300 British police officers who formed an armed guard for the relatives of the dead as they entered the church. The Archbishop of Canterbury helped with that service, and it was also attended by the Foreign Secretary, Jack Straw. And afterwards, we caught up with Tracy Larkey. Tracy is the mother of 3 young children, and her husband died on September the 11th in one of the towers that used to stand behind me.
It's been very difficult. Every day's been a battle. I have 3 sons who are 13, 12 and 3, and it's been very difficult for them. We're trying to move forward, which is very hard, and with the anniversary coming round so very quickly, it's still very raw for them.
John, we saw very poignant pictures just half an hour or so ago of the Stars and Stripes being lowered over the White House.
That's right. US Marines lowering those flags a little while ago over the White House, and that's a picture that will be reflected all over the United States. A day of mourning, a day of reflection for people throughout this country, but also, Eamon, a day of high anxiety because this country is now on a state of high alert, and that is official. That was officially declared by President Bush just over 12 hours ago. And what that will mean is that we'll see F-16 fighters in the sky over Manhattan and in the sky over Washington, and anti-aircraft missiles on the ground if there is indeed, in case there is indeed any attack. Out on the streets there will be thousands and thousands of patrolmen and indeed, unusually, the members of the National Guard. And sensitive areas like the UN are going to be cordoned off. The type of security here in the US that we sadly have appreciated and had to put up with in the UK for 25 or 30 years.
John, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
And many British families who were unable to make the trip to New York will pay their respects to their loved ones at a special service of remembrance at St Paul's Cathedral. That commences at 1:15 this afternoon. Lorraine Kelly is there for us this morning. Morning, Lorraine. What is happening there today?
Well, as you said, St Paul's, it's going to be the focal point, really, I suppose, for people's grief, and the great and the good will be here, dignitaries will be here. Prince Charles is going to be representing the Queen. The Queen, you remember, at the ceremony last year, a couple of days after the attacks, was visibly moved, as was the rest of the world. Prince Charles will be here, Prince Harry will be here, Tony Blair will be here as well, showing solidarity. He said he would stand shoulder to shoulder with America. He has never wavered from that, as we've seen in the past few days. But really, this ceremony is all about the people who lost loved ones in the disaster. It really is about them. 67 British people lost their lives, and their friends, their family are going to be here, some 600 of them. And the ceremony's been planned really with them in mind. It's going to be very moving. It's going to be very difficult for them. It's going to be very tough. Candles will be lit. The first candle is going to be lit by Alexandra Clark. She lost her daughter in the Twin Towers. After that, there'll be a minute's silence. And then I suppose the most moving part of the service is going to be where these 3,000 white rose petals are going to float down from the ceiling onto the congregation. And that's going to be very tough for everybody. That's, of course, to remember everyone who died at New York and Washington and in Pennsylvania, the plane that crashed there. So it is going to be very, very tough. Security actually is very tight here. It's getting tighter all the time, and traffic is going to be closed off very, very shortly, just to make sure there's a heightened sense of of security, and people feeling a bit jittery, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Lorraine, thank you very much for that. Lorraine, live from St. Paul's there.
OK, let's get an update on the rest of the news you're waking up to on this Wednesday morning. Here's Penny Smith with those details.
Thanks very much, Eamon. Good morning. Armed police are patrolling much of central London and other potential targets around Britain this morning on the anniversary of 9/11. Amanda Sargent is at Westminster by the House of Parliament. Amanda, good morning to you. Very high security today, not just there but throughout Britain.
You're absolutely right. Good morning, Penny. Cities up and down the country are on high alert this morning. Thousands of extra police are on duty. The idea is to be very visible to reassure the public. But anywhere like airports, bus stations, railway stations, the underground railway system here in London, anywhere that's going to have a lot of people coming in and out today are considered vulnerable, and that's where the police are going to be concentrating their energies today. Now, London would be the obvious place for a terrorist attack if that should happen, so security here is particularly tight, especially around important buildings like the Houses of Parliament, like Whitehall, where all the government and diplomatic buildings are, and places like Buckingham Palace. Now, a little further down the river is the City of London, and police there have put into operation a ring of steel, is how they're describing it. And what that means is that there are a series of armed roadblocks. They put all the big companies there on alert. They've told the companies to speak to their staff, put people on alert, make sure their CCTV cameras are working, are in operation, and they hope that way they will keep people safe today. But I have to say, across the city generally, there are armed roadblocks, which seems an extraordinary thing to see in London at key points in and out of the city. And the police are pulling motorists over. They're stopping cars, stopping vans, checking people's licence details, making sure that people are who they claim they are.
The problem, of course, is that there is no one area of danger. It could come from anywhere, couldn't it?
No, you're absolutely right. And the police are keen to stress they have no intelligence that suggests that London or anywhere else in the UK could be the subject of a terrorist attack. And I think perhaps that what they're more worried about today is not so much a huge international organisation like Al-Qaeda targeting the UK, but maybe a fanatic, the terrorist working alone, who might see the anniversary of September the 11th as an opportunity to get some publicity. And it's that kind of person that the police are really guarding against. But I have to say they are taking all of this very seriously, but they are saying to the public, look, don't be alarmed, but be on your guard. And that means don't panic, don't worry, you are safe today, you should be safe today. But if you do see anybody acting suspiciously or you see any odd packages, don't hesitate to contact the authorities.
Amanda, thanks very much. Well, the American ambassador to Britain, William Farish, is at the US Embassy in central London. Good morning to you. Obviously, the security very high there this morning.
Yes, Penny, it is, but not any more than normal, really. We are under a code orange security alert, and so, you know, I think everybody's taking all the normal precautions.
What does it mean, a code orange security?
Well, it's just, I think there are 4 categories. This is the second highest, and you'd have to get more details from the police, but we certainly don't notice any necessarily higher alert.
What will be happening there to mark today's anniversary?
At 10 o'clock, there'll be a service in Grosvenor Square, and a memorial service, and then we go to St. Paul's for a service at 1 o'clock, a major memorial service, and then again the American Church tonight.
Do you think change the way that Americans view the world? Oh, unfortunately, we seem to be having a few problems with links this morning, but thank you very much to William Farish for joining us there at the US Embassy in central London. Well, Defence Secretary Jeff Hoon travelled to the US to talk to his American counterpart about Iraq. It's part of the ongoing change of focus away from Afghanistan and onto the country ruled by Saddam Hussein. Well, Alan Fisher is in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad.
Good morning. Well, there are certainly no plans to mark September the 11th here in Baghdad, no plans for any commemoration or demonstration. The Iraqis know just how badly it would play around the rest of the world if there were scenes of hundreds of people on the streets here in Baghdad burning American flags on today of all day. We're not expecting any senior government ministers to make any speeches either. You can see here the Iraq Daily, which is the main English language newspaper here. They make no mention at all of Tony Blair's speech yesterday to the TUC, or indeed to September the 11th. He is quoted extensively in Babel, which is one of the main Arabic language newspapers here, but the phrase that is missing from the coverage is when he described Saddam as an international outlaw. And you can see in 2 other newspapers there is coverage of September the 11th and marking it there, and also pictures of Osama bin Laden. But the people here will not be marking September the 11th. I spoke to many ordinary people on the streets. They said they remembered September the 11th last year. They felt sorry for the people in the towers as the plane hit. But they also remember what America has done here with the sanctions and also with the war in '91, and they're also worried about future action. And they say because of that, very few tears will be shed here on September the 11th.
Alan Fisher in Baghdad. Other news, and the death toll in floods in the southeast of France has risen to 26. Many towns are cut off as the floodwaters have submerged roads and swept away homes. Hundreds of thousands of houses still don't have electricity. The French government has promised £7 million in emergency aid. It's 12 minutes past 8. That's it from me. Here are Fiona and Damon.
Thanks very much, Penny. A lot of you sharing your memories of where you were when you heard about what had happened on September the 11th last year. A lot of you using our new text service to share your memories with us.
Yeah, Scarlett Marchant, who's 5, said, I was at school when my mum told me. I was scared because we live by an airport and I thought they would hit my school or house. Sarah says, a year ago today I was celebrating my 14th birthday. Today is my 15th. I will never be able to get this day, forget this day because of that and the tragic events.
And Susan Shepherd from Hayward in Lancashire says, today is my son's birthday. A lot of you trying to celebrate today. You will celebrate. Life does go on. She says his name is Albert Shepherd, and it's also his first day at school. But
Albert,
isn't that a lovely name for a little boy?
Isn't it? For
30, maybe. Yeah. Well, last year when the attacks were happening, I was coming home with presents and birthday cake for him. And she says, please do remember there are people who will be celebrating family events today. It's a happy day for her family, but she says she'll also be thinking about those who suffered on this day last year, as will we all.
If you've got a memory to share with us, please do text us at the number there on your screen.
Now it is 83021. Okay, next up in the programme, we're live to Afghanistan. We'll see the capital, Kabul, in a moment. There we are, the live pictures of Kabul there this morning. The country obviously bore the full brunt of America's wrath in the wake of the September the 11th attacks. And we're going to be hearing from an old friend, Lara Logan. She's back there for us this week.
Right now, the time's coming up to 8:15, and we're going to go to your region for the news, the weather and the travel, wherever you're waking up. There's been gunfire this morning at the Bagram Air Base just outside the Afghanistan capital of Kabul. American forces stationed there returned fire and believe they wounded the gunman. Also at Bagram this morning is Lara Logan, who spent many nights on the front line there last winter. Well, she's back in her new role as a correspondent for the American network CBS. And earlier on the programme, I asked her how she thought things had changed over the past year.
They've changed dramatically, Eamon. I promise you, you wouldn't believe it. Probably the first thing, you can see the American flag here behind me. Now, that's very different from when I was here a year ago, living with the Northern Alliance. At that time, the Americans were still bombing the Taliban frontline trenches. Now, this is the heart of their operations here in Afghanistan. The conventional war is largely over for the moment. Al-Qaeda's bases and training camps have been destroyed here, and their forces have been dispersed. But that doesn't mean that they've left the country. That doesn't mean that they're gone completely. We've been speaking to U.S. Special Forces who confirmed there's been an increase in Al-Qaeda activity in the eastern part of the country, more of them coming back into Afghanistan from Pakistan, and they think that this situation is going to hot up. So one thing that everyone here agrees on is that this war is far from over, but they're fighting a war on another front now, and that's the war of winning the hearts and minds of the Afghan people and reconstructing the country, which is now under an interim government, and that in itself is a huge change.
You get the impression as well, Lara, that a line can't be drawn under all of this until someone finds out the fate of Osama bin Laden. He's on the front page of the Daily Mail here back in Britain this morning. The question is, where the hell is he now? Are they talking about him there?
Yes, of course, Eamon. They're talking about him here all the time. This is a question that gets asked over and over again. And the one thing I can tell you is that the U.S. sources here say that they have absolutely no evidence to say whether Osama bin Laden is alive or dead, and they have absolutely no idea where he is, if indeed he is alive. So there doesn't seem to be any progress there in the past year. But one thing that happened recently, an Arab television station, Al Jazeera, did an interview with two men who allegedly took part in planning the September 11th attacks. And in the course of that interview, one of the men referred to Osama bin Laden in the past tense. So some experts and analysts have said that this is the clearest indication yet that Osama bin Laden might in fact be dead, but of course there's no confirmation of that.
Lara Logan from Bagram Air Base. The time, 8:20.
Now, we're going to go back to Ground Zero now, where, of course, these terrible events took place a year ago today. We're going to speak to a British woman who had a miraculous escape on that day. She's Janice Brooks, and there she is. Janice, it is so nice to see you. Never have those words been truer, really. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. A year ago today, I know you've never been back there, Janice, until today. So how are you feeling? What thoughts are going through your head standing in that spot there this morning?
My heart is pounding, actually. I haven't been back here since October last year. We're on the roof of a pub, we're on the 5th floor, literally looking over to Ground Zero. I'm sure you've seen it several times behind John. When I saw it for the first time, my mouth went dry. There's just a huge gap in the sky where the building stood. Just looking over now, it seems very small and very tidy. It's hard to believe that the towers were there. And looking down now, it just seems so nice and neat. I didn't expect it to be so neat.
And belies the enormity of what actually did happen there, Janice. Now then, we're all talking about this miraculous escape of yours, and it really was miraculous. Just tell us what happened. You'd been working in the World Trade Center for what, just a month, hadn't you?
I came to America in May for 10 weeks just to see how I liked New York. I actually was back in the office on August the 27th, so literally 2 weeks before it happened. Our office is on the 84th floor of the South Tower. We have the whole floor. I was literally at my desk. My boss was in London. As I was leaving, I called him, spoke to someone in London who told me to leave the office rather quickly, which I did. On the way going down, when the plane hit, I was basically in between two floors and trapped in a corridor. The ceiling fell down behind me. There was screaming, there was smoke, there was a woman that came through the door when we finally managed to open it, that basically her arm was almost hanging off. So there was blood everywhere, and I think for the first time that I actually started to get frightened was when I saw her blood. And then when I saw her blood on my shirt, I think that I suddenly realised that maybe I was in a bit of trouble here.
Yeah, and I bet you thought you'd never be standing there today, and thank goodness you are. And that phone call from your colleague is probably the most important phone call he's ever made in his life. Have you met up with him since?
I've been back to London, yes, a couple of times. He's very embarrassed, actually. He tells me that everyone now just thinks he swears all the time. But without a doubt, I mean, the urgency in his voice got me going. I just, as I said before, I don't remember hanging up the phone. I certainly don't remember saying goodbye to him. I just ran through the dealing floor. So it amazed me then, and it amazes me now that he was so far away, yet he knew what was happening basically in the building behind me, and I really had no idea.
Yeah, thank goodness he did, Janice. Now, I know you sound very much as though that experience is so vivid in your mind, but it has affected you, hasn't it, over the past year? How has your life changed?
Every facet of my life's changed. I look in the mirror now and I'm certainly not the person that I used to be. I feel very lost. I've always been a planner. I've always known exactly where I was going on holiday, when I was going on holiday, but now I just don't plan anything. I don't know how many tomorrows I have. I think that friends, I have the best friends, have just been very indulgent of me, letting me ring them in the middle of the night and basically cry down the telephone. So the things that I notice about myself is if suddenly I think of someone, I will stop what I'm doing and I will call them. Whereas maybe before I had to say, okay, I'll call Kevin tomorrow, I actually stop what I'm doing and I call Kevin.
So it's had a profound effect on you, hasn't it? And I know if you're out of an evening and a stranger comes up to talk to you, maybe chat you up, Janice, you can't help but tell them about what happened to you, can you?
Well, I try very hard not to. I mean, particularly I've met people at the gym and they say, you're English, how long have you been here? So I say I've been here a year. And the first thing that they say to me, almost 3 or 4 people have said this to me, not a very good time to move to New York. And I just say, no, it wasn't. You know, do you work downtown? The gym that I go to is opposite my office. So I literally go downtown and they know that I work downtown. So it's very, very awkward to talk about. I don't volunteer the information, but that's all that Americans at the moment particularly want to talk about.
And Janice, I know you've said that it's actually affected your weight too, hasn't it? How has it had that effect? Have you been comfort eating?
It's very easy to eat junk food in America, as I'm sure everyone knows. I think I've probably put on about 30 pounds. I'm eating for England.
You carry on eating for England. It's lovely to speak to you. And I know those memories will never disappear, but let's hope they fade a bit over the coming year, Janice. Look, before you go, just mention that colleague of yours. He might be watching this morning, and he deserves a name check, I think.
Hello, Robin Clark. Thank you so much. You really saved my life.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Janice. Thanks a lot. Well, nice lady.
Janice Brooks' story. Destination is St. Paul's Cathedral next, where many of the families and friends of the 67 British victims will gather later today for a service of remembrance. We'll be back with details of that right after this short break. Come 8:30 now exactly to St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Lorraine Kelly is there with us this morning, where later today around lunchtime there will be a service of remembrance there for the 67 Britons killed on September the 11th. But Lorraine, I remember your programme coming from New York actually, and that wasn't too long before the attacks, was it?
No, that's right. I remember it vividly, Eamon. I remember we went up in a helicopter. We took aerial shots of the Twin Towers, an experience I'll never forget. We actually did one of our programmes from the top of Tower 1, the windows on the World Restaurant, famous restaurant, big tourist attraction, and we were there. Everybody made us very, very welcome. It was an extraordinary place to be. I always remember the view from there was just incredible, and the feeling that when it was actually quite bad weather when we were there, and the towers actually moved slightly, which was a bit unnerving, but everybody was so good to us. They looked after us so well. Lots of characters that we met. One really stuck in my mind. It was the head chef of Windows on the World, a brilliant guy called Michael Lamonaco, and Michael should have been there when the planes hit. He should have actually been upstairs. It was a normal day for him. He should have been up there in his very busy kitchen, but one of those twists of fate, he actually had to have his eyes tested in the foyer downstairs, lots of shops downstairs of the Twin Towers, and he was there having his eyes tested. Otherwise, he would have been dead, and this is his story.
It was early. It was 8:15. I actually was 10 or 15 minutes earlier than usual. Typically, I'd be in the kitchen by 8:30. That just saved my life. I was sitting in the chair, the examining chair, with the doctor examining my glasses and my eyes when at 8:46, and there was a rumble in the building. I ran to a phone, tried to call my wife. I called my wife to say, you know, I was outside and something terrible had happened. I didn't know what, but something terrible had indeed happened, and I was outside and safe. It was, you know, minutes later when I saw the second building explode, and then I knew it was something that was beyond comprehension.
So when the reality of what you saw when you came out hit you, what was your first thought? Was it of your friends, your colleagues?
I can only think of my friends. That's all I could think of. All I could think of were the dozens of people who I knew were at work that morning at Windows, were the dozens of people who I knew working in other offices in that building. And I knew many, many people working in both towers.
There's an empty space down there at the moment where the two towers once stood. What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see replace the Twin Towers? And what would the families like to see?
The families have suffered more than we could ever really understand. I just think that we could try to empathize, but we can't really know how terribly painful and horrific this has been for them. We need to take that 16 acres and really use it as a stark reminder of the way in which we were attacked, how civilians who just went to work lost their lives.
That was Michael LaMonaco, whose life has been changed forever. 79 of his friends and colleagues died, 79 people that he'll never see again. And do you remember those horrific shots that we saw, those horrific pictures and video that we saw of people actually jumping? That to me was the most horrible, vivid memory of what happened. And several of those have actually been identified as colleagues of Michael. And it's changed his life. It's changed all the lives of people who were touched by it.
Made more relevant, of course, Lorraine, by the fact that you had actually visited the towers. I must say, on the two or three occasions I've been to New York, I never actually got there. I did the helicopter trip and whatever around them, but never actually set foot in them.
Yeah, it really does bring it home to you. Anybody that I've spoken to who's actually been there, and like I say, we were there for the whole day. We did the whole show from there. Again, everybody made us very, very welcome and talked to us, and it was just such a fantastic place. And we met so many really lovely people, including Michael, of course. And he's gone on to actually do quite a lot of work and of charity work. I mean, he spent the whole day helping people and trying to do what he could.
Now, Lorraine, 67 people from over Britain and Ireland lost their lives in that whole thing, and that's why you're there today at St. Paul's Cathedral. Tell us what the plan is for there today.
Well, you mentioned people. There's going to be about 600 relatives of friends of the 67 British people who died. They really are the most important. Of course, you'll have the usual dignitaries here. Tony Blair's going to be here. Prince Charles will be here representing the Queen, and Prince Harry's going to turn up too. But really, it's for the people, the friends and the relatives of those who died. It's going to be very poignant. There was a flag found at Ground Zero, very battered flag, very grubby. It's going to be here. It's going to be draped over the altar, and that's going to be, I suppose, a focus for people. As well as that, there's going to be candles lit. There'll be a minute's silence. And then, as I've said, I think the most poignant part of the whole service is going to be where these 3,000 petals from roses, white rose petals, are going to sort of fall down onto the congregation, and that's to remember everybody who died, of course, and that's going to be very sad. It's going to be a beautiful service. They put an awful lot of planning into this. They want it to be just right, but it's going to be really, really tough for everyone here.
Thanks, Lorraine. Thank you very much.
Lots of you have been sharing your memories with us this morning. I bet you remember where you were, don't you?
Oh, yeah, of course, you not forget.
Does. Yeah, I'd just woken up from a sleep, actually, working early in the morning and everything, and I just couldn't believe what was unravelling before my eyes on the telly. But for every death, a miracle of life, there is a birth. And September the 11th, says Michelle Bicknell, was a wonderful day for my husband and I, as I was in labour and gave birth to our first son, Lewis Sean Bicknell, who's obviously celebrating his first birthday today. And she says that although obviously that was a very happy time for her, she said we became the perfect family last year, but we're still so sad at the loss of so many other families on this day.
There's an interesting, lots of the papers have supplements today about this, and here's an interesting one here. I think this one came from the Mirror, and I was just flicking through it. It just shows it's 4 pictures of 2 people, basically. And the thing that always amazes me when I see the pictures is when people were fleeing the building covered in that dust, and you thought, well, if the planes didn't get you, if the burning buildings didn't get you, the falling buildings, then the dust clouds, you would have choked in the dust clouds. And there are those 2 people, one's called Marcy, the other's called Ed, covered in that. How they breathed, yeah. And yet there they are. They lived to tell the tale, but gosh, what state their lungs must have been in after that, whatever.
It really brings it back to you, doesn't it?
Memories, anything comes back to you, you want to text us, number now on your screen, 83021.
Right, let's go back to Ground Zero, and we haven't got John Stapleton yet. We will have him in a moment, but in the early hours of the morning in New York, in Manhattan to be more precise, New York police have been slowly processing toward Ground Zero. Bearing in mind it's about 3:37 in the morning in New York now. There they are, New York police and their bagpipes proceeding very, very slowly through Manhattan. They started on the outskirts of the town. and they'll end up at Ground Zero later on today. John Stapleton is there for us right now. That procession will be joining you there later on, John, but for now, what do you have to tell us?
Good morning to you, Fiona. Yes, those pipers will come into Ground Zero behind me here, where they'll join the relatives of the people who lost their lives, and they'll walk down that ramp, which I think you can probably see, that illuminated ramp, and there'll be a memorial service at the bottom of that ramp when each and every name of those who died will be read out, and that in itself could take, I'm told, up to 3 hours. Someone will also read part of the Gettysburg Address. That's the speech made by Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War, which sort of sets out the American creed, the right to freedom of speech, etc., the right to worship whoever you wish to worship, very appropriate in these circumstances. But America, of course, has not forgotten the British people either while you've been asleep. There was a service for the 67 victims of the atrocity who came from Britain. That was held at St Thomas's Church in another part of the island. And amongst those in attendance, some 300 British police officers who formed a guard of honour for the relatives of the dead as they went into church. Service conducted in part at least by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and also attending was the Foreign Secretary Jack Straw. A very touching gesture this by these police officers, Fiona, because they've gone over there at their own expense. They weren't coming here on taxpayers' money or their forces' money. They came because they just felt they ought to be here with those people, many of whom I will probably come back down here again later this morning.
Lots of markers across the television network in this country to remember that day a year ago, John. How is American television covering the anniversary?
Well, to use a phrase from our business, Fiona, it's been wall to wall. I mean, you just simply cannot switch on the television without seeing something about September the 11th. And I mean, you literally can't. All day, all night, documentaries, interviews, etc., perspectives, analysis, etc., where we go from here, you name it, they've been doing it. And that's brought some criticism, because some people think that the networks have been, as it were, cashing in on this and sensationalising it in the hope that they can get increased ratings. And people say that's not helping them cope with their grief. And this is a sort of sample of some of the stuff they've been watching.
Witness the only footage from inside Ground Zero in this piece of history that's amazing to watch. Remembering 9/11, the ones who were lost, the ones they left behind. Dan Rather joins September 11 survivors. Incredible stories of survival and healing.
Wednesday marks 1 year since the day America changed forever.
And John, I know that we have taken a decision here on GMTV today not to use those images of the planes impacting into the Twin Towers for fear, obviously, that it would upset countless people. Have they been using those images on television in America?
Well, most of them have been exercising a degree of restraint, I should say, Fiona. That's absolutely right. And in fairness to the American networks, I mean, let's not forget, I mean, this was some event. I mean, this is up there along with the assassination of Kennedy, Pearl Harbor even in America's history. This was America's darkest day. It's hardly possible to imagine a day that was worse. So they've got to cover it. They're duty-bound to cover it. It's just a question of how much coverage they give it and the way in which they treat it. And that's what has actually caused some upset with some people who are now saying, you know, they'll find it difficult to come here. Even the relatives of the dead, they'll find it difficult to come here and face all this. And that's partly because of what they've seen on television.
John, for the moment, thanks very much indeed.
The time's just after 20 minutes to 9 on this Wednesday morning. We're going to go to Leicester right after the break, where we're going to have reaction from Britain's Muslim community to today's anniversary. We'll be back with that right after this.
Have you tried the dairy-free alternative to milk? Alpro. Dairy-free and delicious.
Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
The very best of smooth jazz. 40 classic tracks on one double album, featuring Louis Armstrong, George Benson, Grover Washington Jr., Nina Simone, and Earth, Wind and Fire. The very best of smooth jazz, out now.
Think about it. You could borrow anything from £5,000 to £60,000 from First Plus just by calling 0800 479 6060 today. A loan from First Plus means gentle monthly repayments. Like these. Whether you've got equity in your property or not. It's so simple. If you're a homeowner, First Plus could agree a flexible, affordable loan in just a matter of minutes. So whatever you're thinking of doing, giving existing credit bills the elbow, or even making life a little more pleasant for yourself, the friendly, helpful people at First Plus could organise it straight away. Think positive. Think First Plus. Call today on 0800 479 6060. First Plus, because life is for living.
Welcome to our world, a very special place to be, where children can discover all there is to see. Oh, so many friends to meet, no matter where they roam. The world of little people.
Little people, only from Fisher-Price.
An easy, tasty way to take vitamins today. Bassett Soft and Chewy Vitamins is what we say. For growing kids and moms, gran and granddad too. Bassett Soft and Chewy Vitamins for me and you. Bassett's delicious soft and chewy vitamins. Now everyone loves to take their vitamins.
Hey, did you know there are now 100 extra points on a whole load of products?
No. Really?
Yeah, the proof's in the pudding.
Tesco. Every little helps.
Just think, for the equivalent of around £3 a week, a healthy 30-year-old can insure themselves over 20 years for £100,000.
I don't think we'll ever get over losing him, but I just wish we'd talked about the future more. I mean, I never thought this would happen to me.
No amount of money can replace a wife or mother, but it does help to make life easier.
I don't think we'll be able to stay on in this house. We had the car insured, we had the house and all its contents insured, but we didn't have our lives insured.
Lifeline Direct made it so easy for us, and at the time we didn't even miss the £3 a week for the policy. I don't think we realised just how much difference it was going to make.
Call Lifeline Direct now on 0845 8400 500 and get instant cover. You owe it to your family.
Lifeline Direct.
Quarter to 9, the Muslim community here in Britain will also be remembering those who died on September the 11th. We go now to Sue Jameson, who's in Leicester this morning, and she'll tell us more. Good morning, Sue.
Yes, good morning, Eamon. I'm with the Mogra family this morning, who are part of the Muslim community here in Leicester. It's quite a big community, around 30,000 strong. And in fact, I spent a lot of yesterday going around and just talking to people on the streets, asking them for what they felt had happened for them since the September the 11th.
What happened, it was very bad. It shouldn't have happened because all the innocent people died, children as well. It's not very good. I feel very guilty somehow.
It has been a great Islamophobic attitude from certain people in the community, but personally I haven't seen any of this, but other people have been affected by this.
I didn't have that much racism when I wasn't a Muslim, as I've had as a Muslim with a headscarf on. And a lot of people have took them off, but you should stand up and be proud of your religion.
So a range of opinions there, but really everyone I've spoken to felt they'd been affected in some way. Now, we're with Ibrahim this morning and two of his boys. We have Osama here and Hubei there, 12 and 9. Now, do you feel, as some of those people were saying, that there has been a backlash against the Muslims after September 11?
Definitely, there has been a backlash. I think the Muslim community has suffered throughout the world as a result of what certain individuals did in the States. But if I can speak for Leicester, I think things have been reasonably okay. We've had good relations within the community in Leicester. But we're worried about young people like Osama and other teenagers also who have so many questions, worrying questions on their minds. They wonder why we have to take the blame for what happened in the States. They come up with questions like, we don't blame the Christian community for what Hitler did, so why should the Muslim community be blamed for what certain individuals did thousands of miles away, where our faith teaches us peace and to live in harmony with everyone around us.
Now, one of the things I found yesterday when I was in Leicester, because obviously I spoke to many more people than we just saw there, was that particularly the women didn't really want to talk to me, but also people saying, oh, it's not an issue we want to discuss. So do you think people feel under pressure here, Muslims feel under pressure all the time?
I think there's been a lot of media attention. We've had our fair share of the highlights over the past few months, and people are now just wondering why do we always have to answer questions? Why are people always asking us these things when we just want to be decent citizens, go about our daily life as everybody else does, and we have nothing to do with the horrendous acts that were carried out in the States.
You spend a lot of time, I know, going to schools and colleges and talking about Islam and trying to explain what it really is. Are you having any joy at all? Do you feel people do understand more?
I think it has been very satisfactory. I think it's an important area of work where we need to educate young people, talk to them and show them what Islam truly represents and what it teaches. For example, I've been to a grammar school where majority of the children are non-Muslim, just a dozen or two Muslim children.
Yes.
And before my visit, they were having some rough times. And after my visit, after the assembly, things changed. And the boy said to me, you know, it really worked. And
so that's something that's positive. I think the answer is just have to keep on talking, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Back to you in studio.
Sue, thank you very much indeed for that.
Now then, one of the most enduring images of a year ago was the bravery of the men and women of the New York Fire Department, one of whom is here with us this morning, Lieutenant John McCall. Nice to see you this morning. And it really has had repercussions, hasn't it, what happened a year ago?
Yes, it has, yes.
But, I mean, personally for you, you've had to have counselling, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I got my own type of counseling with the help of the therapy that's laid out in the book Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard.
That's Scientology, yeah? So,
yeah,
right.
yeah. And it's helped me a great deal to deal with it. And I mention it in the book simply for the fact that to not do so would be like more of an overt thing, because I know it could help guys, and I'd like to see guys reach for it.
There must be a lot of guys who actually couldn't cope with it in so many ways. 343 dead in terms of firefighters. And then, would you be aware of people taking early retirement and not being able to continue with work on sick leave or whatever?
Yeah, in fact, 2 guys just retired that work not far from me, and they just got their 20 years in and they're out, gone, retired. A lot of guys are retiring because of the trauma and the whole emotional thing that's connected with it. A lot of guys are retiring because they made a lot of money in the last year of overtime, and they won't see that kind of money again, so they're getting out. So there's a big change in the job. There's like 15 on.
And then how does the city actually cope with that? How does the city replace that experience and that sort of manpower?
I just don't see it happening. It's we've taken a great hit as far as the experience goes, like Chief Callan mentioned earlier on the show. So many guys, so many years, so much knowledge. All the rescue companies were all decimated, you know. They were all down there early on the scene. Every single rescue company and squad company were greatly, deeply affected by this. It's going to take quite a while before we get up to where we're back in some shape.
Replenishing stock, so to speak.
Yeah.
I wonder if you recognise this fire station that we're going to see in a moment, John. Rachel Harrison is at a New York fire station this morning, and that is the fire station of which brigade, Rachel?
It's Rescue 1, Fiona, and I can tell you it's an absolute privilege to be standing outside it today. It's a very emotional day and a very difficult day for many of the firefighters here. They've had lots of well-wishers that have come through, streaming past, going in and saying thank you very much to the men that work here for all the effort and all the hard work they've put in over the last 12 months. Many have actually laid flowers for those that were actually working at this station a year ago today. On the morning of the 11th, there were 11 men sitting at the back of this station. They were just coming to the end of a very long night shift and were preparing to go home. 11 men were then called down to the North Tower on the basis that there was an emergency. They went and they never returned. All of those men died, but they all shared a common bond. One was the love of their job, and the other the love of New York, the city they'd been working for. There was a 63-year-old firefighter who I've been told was near to retirement and very reluctant to leave. There was also the 41-year-old who, if he'd just stayed alive for one more day, would have found out that his wife was expecting their first child. And the captain they called Manhattan, because he thought this was the greatest city in the world. It's been a very difficult day and a tough day for all of the men here and fire brigades across Manhattan, but they've been buoyed by the support they've had from the world and from Britain. There was a special memorial service today for the British families who lost their loved ones in the disaster, and there were 300 police officers that came over. Each officer paid for their own trip, their own hotel, and took their own annual leave to be here for this very difficult but very special time. All of them wanted to show their support and to say that Britain was thinking of them. And I spoke to one lady, Tracy Larkey. She lost her husband. He was working for Cantor Fitzgerald that morning, and she said to me, it's really been a real struggle over the last year.
It's been very difficult. Every day's been a battle. I have 3 sons who are 13, 12 and 3, and it's been very difficult for them. We're trying to move forward, which is very hard, and with the anniversary coming round so very quickly, it's still very raw for them.
Tracy, like many others who've lost their loved ones, won't be watching television screens today. They'll be having their own personal memorials in their homes and being with their loved ones and families. It's a very common thing across Manhattan today.
Rachel, thanks very much indeed.
Lieutenant John McCall, our studio guest this morning, firefighter in New York, and he brought out this book which is released today, The Second Tower's Down. How will you commemorate today? We're talking about so many people's experiences. Will you take a quiet moment at some time today, or what will be your approach?
Yeah, in and among all the things I'm doing today, yes. Yeah, I guess at some point I'll have to sit and reflect on what happened, you know. It's very emotional, you know. When you think about it, you could sit and think about it and really get yourself upset, which was a problem in the beginning, because you'd find yourself, I'd look at the pictures of all the guys, and I'd look and I'd start thinking, and it really kind of sucks you in and becomes all you think about. So I try not to do that, you know.
And you couldn't eat, you couldn't sleep for a while after, could you?
Yeah. The first night I came home, I didn't sleep at all, and then I had to work the next day for 24 hours, and I think I might have got an hour's sleep. So I went for a long time there without any real sleep. A lot of guys didn't sleep for a long time.
Well, yeah. Was the book somewhat therapeutic for you, writing the book?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could say that, yeah. Going over it again and again and again. Yeah, it was more at some point in time it came like a sense of responsibility to get it done, get it on paper, and so I could let everybody know what I went through and how I got through it and how I feel better now.
And what's your view? We're all talking now about, you know, possible war with Iraq and that sort of thing. As an American, I mean, do you feel a year on there's still some unfinished business to take care of?
As far as
who perpetrated this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not a politician, but it just shows the sad state of affairs this world is in, and it's going to take a lot of work on everybody's part to make this world a better place.
And if it takes a war, it takes a war.
Well, nothing has ever been accomplished with war. I mean, it quiets things down for a little bit, but no lasting peace has ever been a result of war, and it's going to take some working together with the different peoples of this world to make the world a saner, safer place, which is something that I mentioned in the book.
John McCall, lovely talking to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Later on, I'm not quite sure. Yes, we're going to Los Angeles, apparently, as America's showbiz community makes its own special tribute to the victims of September the 11th. That was a tribute that took place shortly after the events of last year. Talking to people like Goldie Hawn about how the following year, the last year, has been in their lives. That's still to come.
Verrucas and warts are easily spread, but Bazooka Gel offers a clinically proven treatment with no need for plasters. So Bazooka that verruca.
We asked 4 experts to try and make the Avant Magic Cup spill.
Oh, I give up. Try this.
magic. Easy sip, non-drip, however hard you try.
Hey, did you know there are now 100 extra points on a whole load of products?
No, really?
Yeah, the proof's in the pudding.
Tesco. Every little helps.
Do you no longer wish to wear glasses or of the odd shower just blowing in off the North Sea? Now, I said those sea breezes are going to be affecting temperatures. Quite chilly out to the west, but generally not too bad, above average for this time of year. Fiona or Eamon, either one.
Thanks very much, Andrew. You're watching GMTV today. It is, of course, the first anniversary of September the 11th. John Stapleton at Ground Zero, where the atrocities unfolded on this day last year. And John, I guess a huge day of events planned to remember in the United States today.
Yes, and the focus of attention right behind me, Fiona, because in a few hours' time, that's where there'll be the memorial service to the relatives of those who lost their lives. They'll march or walk down that ramp you can see behind me. When they get to the bottom there, they'll have the service during which the name of every single person who lost their lives will be read out. It could take 3 or 4 hours, they don't care how long, but that will happen. And imagine what a day it will be for them, Fiona. I mean, bad enough, heaven knows how any of us would cope with seeing one of our loved ones killed live on television, as it were, watching the events unfold here with those 2 towers crumbling and the appalling scenes that we witnessed. Bad enough to have to go through that, but then to have to come back here and realise that that is all that's left of that scene. I'm mindful of a quote from one lady who said, who's not far from here, she said, you know, where is the book, Tonya? Where is the book for the 30-year-old mother of a 2-year-old child who's seen her husband die on television? How do you cope with that? How do you come to terms with that? The only bonus is, I suppose, that it may well be that this is a bit of a turning point. Today proves a bit of a watershed, and they can begin to cope with some of the problems they've had in the last few months. The feelings of guilt that they escaped and others didn't, etc. But it's going to be very, very hard indeed. Lots of events happening, not just here in America, but all over the world in the last few hours, and Deborah Bain now sums them up.
The wave of remembrance for the September the 11th victims started with a memorial service in New Zealand. France paid its respects by projecting beams of light into the sky in memory of New York's destroyed Twin Towers. In downtown New York, relatives of the 67 British victims attended a special service for their loved ones killed in a terror attack that shook the world. US Marines have lowered the American flag over the White House as the United States prepares to commemorate the attacks on the World Trade Center, Pentagon and in Pennsylvania. Pipers and drummers from police and firefighter bands in each of New York's 5 boroughs are slowly marching to Ground Zero, where the World Trade Center once stood. They'll join thousands of people at the site, politicians, friends and relatives, to observe a minute's silence for more than 3,000 people who died a year ago today.
Deborah Bain there with the tributes worldwide, and they'll continue here today, as I said, with 2,000 or 3,000, maybe more people congregating behind me, but many more who won't come, many more who feel they're just not ready to face any of this yet. Like one fireman I talked to who said, look, I can't do it. I was there on the day. I can't do it. I'm going to stay with my sister in Ohio. Maybe another day I can go down there, but not right now. So many of them left with grave difficulties, Fiona.
John, thanks very much indeed.
Well, from the east coast to the west coast of America, let's go to Jackie Brambles, who's in Los Angeles there for us this morning. And Jackie, what time of the day or night was it with you when you heard the news?
Well, we're 3 hours behind New York, Eamon, so when that first plane went into the tower, it was 5:46 in the morning in LA, so myself and most other Angelinos were fast asleep. I got a phone call about 5 minutes after that first one hit from my producer, Steve G, out here, who had gotten a phone call, actually a wake-up call from London, who of course were watching it happen as it unfolded. And he just called me up and said, put the telly on, and we stayed on the phone pretty much together and went online trying to get flights out to New York before they grounded all the aeroplanes. And we were actually on the phone with each other when we saw that second plane hit, at which time, of course, it was there was no doubt in our minds that it had been a terrorist attack and that America was under attack. So the next couple of days were a scramble, really, to try and get to New York and try and navigate the chaos in doing that. That's a flight I'll never forget, Eamon. We managed to get one of the first flights out of the LA area at a much smaller airport, Long Beach, just south of LA. And we were on an aeroplane that left at night. It was the red eye, went through the night. Everyone was pretty nervous and tense on board, as you can imagine. We were flying to JFK, one of the airports that were, unfortunately featured in the tragic events in New York. It was an aeroplane that had that DirecTV satellite news. So we had the really unnerving experience of watching that footage over and over and over again as we were in an airplane flying to New York on the first day planes were allowed to fly. The image that will stay with me, although I was in New York and I saw some very harrowing scenes there, I think the one image that's going to stay with me for the rest of my life is flying it towards Manhattan, seeing that massive plume of smoke from miles away. 20 minutes before we got to Manhattan, you could see the smoke. And then the captain decided to, although you couldn't fly over directly ground zero, he flew around it. He flew around the tip of Manhattan. He said he wanted to do that for the sake of the colleagues they'd lost, and the cabin crew started to lose it. We're very emotional, very tearful when we went around it, as was the captain. There was just a stunned silence on the plane, and just the sheer size of the devastation was shocking. It was absolutely shocking because you don't know until you go there. Television just doesn't capture the size of it. It's like a huge, huge chunk of the city has just gone. There's a crater there. And I think that's the one enduring image I'll have, is the one that I got from the airplane going into New York that day.
The attacks were supposed to demoralize, supposed to terrorize, but in fact the Hollywood community where you're based there, it rallied round in quite a wartime spirit, didn't it?
It did, yeah. I mean, I think the stars were, you know, it sounds, I struggle with talking about stars and showbiz and Hollywood on a day like today, and I did last year when it happened, but the fact of the matter is 10 million people live in LA. Nearly all of us are in the entertainment industry. It's a huge money-making, profit-making industry, and it came to a grinding halt that day. And stars a year on have been talking about how they, just like everybody else in LA, felt useless, distanced, and horrified at what they saw on television.
I was scared. I think for the first time since the Cold War, when I was little and I would hide under tables when I'd hear the fire engine because I thought it was an air raid attack, I was scared. And I couldn't stop crying. And I decided to knit the American flag.
New York is an amazing city, and what they've come through, and to see it come back to life, and now with the decisions of what they're going to do next, it's really fascinating.
I remember specifically the moment in which the towers were falling down, the first one being with my mouth totally open and in a state of incredulity. I couldn't believe what I was watching, literally. It was almost like a movie, pretty much like the experience that everybody had.
I think it made those of us lucky enough to be not to be directly affected, I think it made us so unbelievably sort of glad to be here, you know, and I think we all appreciated what we've got a lot more, and hopefully have sort of tried to be nicer in some ways.
Well, Jackie, thanks for that. We've got to leave it there. I know there's a big candlelight vigil to take place tonight there.
Yeah, there is in Hollywood along Sunset Boulevard. There are thousands of people gathering tonight just to pay tribute, and a candlelight vigil throughout the night.
Thanks, Jackie. Thank you very much.
Strange image of Goldie Hawn knitting the American flag. Did she say that's what she felt? Did I hear that correctly? Yeah, compelled to do.
Yes.
Right, after the break we'll be hearing from a remarkable British woman whose life was saved in the Twin Towers by a colleague who phoned her all the way from London. She'll never forget him. Talking to Janice, that's her name, after the break.
Cravendale tastes so good.
Hello again, 12 minutes past 9 is the time on this memorable day. All this morning we've been remembering the events of 12 months ago, and we've spoken to many remarkable people along the way, none more so than Janice Brooks. Now, she's a British woman who escaped from the Twin Towers just minutes before their collapse. She returned to Ground Zero for the first time this morning, and I asked her what it was like to be back.
My heart is pounding, actually. I haven't been back here since October last year. We're on the roof of a pub, we're on the 5th floor, literally looking over to Ground Zero. I'm sure you've seen it several times behind John. When I saw it for the first time, my mouth went dry. There's just a huge gap in the sky where the building stood. Just looking over now, it seems very small and very tidy. It's hard to believe that the towers were there. Yeah. And looking down now, it just seems so nice and neat. I didn't expect it to be so neat.
And belies the enormity of what actually did happen there, Janice. Now then, we're all talking about this miraculous escape of yours, and it really was miraculous. Just tell us what happened. You've been working in the World Trade Center for what, just a month, haven't you?
I came to America in May for 10 weeks just to see how I liked New York. I actually was back in the office on August the 27th, so literally 2 weeks before it happened. Our office is on the 84th floor of the South Tower. We have the whole floor. I was literally at my desk. My boss was in London. As I was leaving, I called him, spoke to someone in London who told me to leave the office rather quickly, which I did. On the way going down, when the plane hit, I was basically in between 2 floors and trapped in a corridor. The ceiling fell down behind me. There was screaming, there was smoke, there was a woman that came through the door when we finally managed to open it, that basically her arm was almost hanging off. So there was blood everywhere, and I think for the first time that I actually started to get frightened was when I saw her blood. And then when I saw her blood on my shirt, I think that I suddenly realised that maybe I was in a bit of trouble here.
Yeah, and I bet you thought you'd never be standing there today, and thank goodness you are. And that phone call from your colleague is probably the most important phone call he's ever made in his life. Have you met up with him since?
I've been back to London, yes, a couple of times. He's very embarrassed, actually. He tells me that everyone now just thinks he swears all the time. But without a doubt, I mean, the urgency in his voice got me going. As I said before, I don't remember hanging up the phone. Certainly don't remember saying goodbye to him. I just ran through the dealing floor. So it amazed me then, and it amazes me now that he was so far away, yet he knew what was happening basically in the building behind me, and I really had no idea.
Yeah, thank goodness he did, Janice. Now, I know you sound very much as though that experience is so vivid in your mind, but it has affected you, hasn't it, over the past year? How has your life changed?
Every facet of my life's changed. I look in the mirror now and I'm certainly not the person that I used to be. I feel very lost. I've always been a planner. I've always known exactly where I was going on holiday, when I was going on holiday, but now I just don't plan anything. I don't know how many tomorrows I have.
Yeah, a remarkable escape, and a lot of you have been texting in this morning. One message said, my goddaughter was at the top of the World Trade Center at 2 o'clock on the 10th of September, the afternoon before it went down, and she flew home to Edinburgh that same evening. She couldn't believe what she was seeing on the television. I bet she couldn't.
The McDonald from Edinburgh, I was 8 months pregnant. One of my thoughts was for my unborn child and the type of world I was bringing her into. Claire says, this time last year I just found out I was pregnant with my son, and what happened in New York made me realise how precious life is. I love him more than anything. A difficult day for many people ahead as we remember the events of a year ago. This morning we've been reflecting on all of that and how people will be commemorating them. One such place they'll be commemorating them, St Paul's Cathedral in London, where Lorraine Kelly is, and the other place, Ground Zero, where John is there in New York. First of all, Lorraine, what's happening there later?
Well, Eamon, lots to come. It really is, the whole focus of this is really for the friends and the family of the British people who died, 67 British people who lost their lives. It's going to be very poignant today. It's going to be very difficult for them. There's actually going to be a flag that's going to be draped over the altar. This is a flag that was found at Ground Zero, very battered, very dirty, very tattered. A bit of a symbol, I guess, of hope, because hopefully some people will get some comfort from today. But it's going to be very, very hard for them. And talking about things that were hard, I just wondered how you found telling this and explaining this to your children, because I found it really tough to try and make sense of this to my daughter, and she's been asking a lot more questions, funnily enough, now than she was a year ago, and you don't want to frighten them, but at the same time you want to be totally honest with them, and it's really difficult.
It is really difficult, and I suppose all you could do, I remember then, they were the first calls that I made to make sure they were okay with them, but they were lucky that they were listening to it on radio on the way home from school, and I actually told them to go and watch it. A lot of people turn their children away from actually watching the images, and I told mine to go and watch the news so that they did understand what it was.
Yep. I remember my little boy, who's only 2 and a bit at the time, actually, and he just said, "It's baddies, Mummy, it's baddies," and that image has stayed with him, of the baddies doing what they did.
He wasn't wrong, was he?
OK, let's go over to Ground Zero, where those events took place a year ago today. And John, just a quick sum up, really, of your impression of what you've seen there at Ground Zero since you've been there over the last couple of days.
My thoughts, Fiona, today, just as the same as they were when I first arrived here. It's difficult to take in the enormity of this crime. As Jackie Brambles was saying, you know, until you get here, you can't do that. All the newspaper articles you read, all the television pictures you see, don't actually prepare you adequately for what is here. You know, you've got to stand here and remember there were once 2 towers there, 2 of the biggest buildings in the world. On this morning, 12 months ago, there were 20-odd thousand people in there. It was a lovely day. They were sitting there having their coffee, they were answering their emails, and suddenly there was this terrific explosion. Nearly 3,000 of them lost their lives. America suffered its darkest day. This country will never be the same again. Possibly the world will never be the same again. And this morning, we have a new worry, the possibility that it might happen again. All sorts of preparations being made right across America to try and stave off that terrible, terrible possibility. America, you know, working very hard to make sure it's prepared for the worst, but very, very much hoping for the best. And you only have to listen to people like Janice, who was talking so eloquently a few minutes ago, to realise what an impact that can have on even the people who survive, never mind those who don't. An experience, quite frankly, Fiona, I will never, ever forget.
No, and there are millions of people who'll join you in that sentiment, John. As you speak there, John, heading toward John, a procession of New York firefighters and policemen. They're proceeding very slowly toward Ground Zero. The time there is only 19 minutes past 4 in the morning. They'll arrive at Ground Zero to mark the anniversary at 8:45.
That's it from us today. Thank you for watching. See you in the morning.